Mr. First, we'd like to speak with you before you continue this route.
I'm halfway through deliveries. What's going on?
Once is a mistake, twice is suspicious. Lonnie First did this hundreds of times across 3 years and left a paper trail, and a digital one, for every single card he...
Several monitored mail pieces from this route never reached their addresses.
Mail goes missing sometimes. That doesn't mean it stayed with me.
He was 42 stops into his afternoon route when the badges came. 312 undelivered envelopes were already loaded into the back of his long-life vehicle. 47 of them contained gift cards. He had been doing this for 3 years. Federal agents had been watching for 9 months. By sunset, investigators would carry every piece of mail off his truck. By the end of the week, they would seize his laptop, his pickup, and the cardboard box in his garage holding 1,800 opened envelopes. $730,000 in face value. 540 households. One grandmother who would not let 3 missing cards go. Before we get into how this carrier turned 3 years of birthday cards into more than $500,000 in cash, I want you to think for a second about every gift card you have ever mailed to someone. Did it arrive? Did you check? Drop a comment if you have ever had a card disappear in the mail. Subscribe if you want to see exactly how investigators caught him. We do this every week. Lonnie Edward First was born in 1981 in Hampton County, South Carolina, in a hospital that no longer exists. His father, Edward First, drove long haul for a regional grocery distributor out of Walterboro. His mother, Patricia, kept the books for a small accounting firm in Estill. They lived in a brick ranch on a half-acre lot off Highway 601, 2 miles outside a town with 1 stoplight and a Hardee's. The low country shaped him in ways that mattered later. His father was on the road 4 days a week. His mother worked evenings during tax season. Lonnie learned to be useful early. He pumped gas at his uncle's filling station starting at age 10, washed windshields for tips, and rode along with his father on weekend runs to Charleston and Columbia. By the time he was 12, he could read a Rand McNally road atlas faster than most adults. He attended Estill High School, where he played offensive line for 2 seasons before quitting to take a job at a tractor supply on Highway 17. His school records describe him as quiet, punctual, and polite to staff. He graduated in 1999 with a 2.4 grade point average and no clear plans. He spent his early 20s drifting between jobs that suited his hands and disappointed his ambitions. He worked the receiving dock at a Lowe's in Walterboro for 14 months. He drove a route truck for a regional bread distributor for 2 years. He spent a summer on a shrimp boat out of Beaufort and came home with a permanent squint and $700 saved. In 2005, he married Brandy Coker, a hairdresser he had known since middle school. Their daughter, Jolene, was born in 2007. Their son, Ridge, in 2010. For 5 years after the children came, he chased steady work and chased it badly. He drove for a flatbed company out of Orangeburg until back pain ended that. He stocked shelves overnight at a buy-low. He poured concrete for a foundation crew until the crew went under. The family lived in a rented double-wide off Pinckney Road. The marriage strained the way marriages strain when the rent is late twice a year. In 2014, at the age of 33, Lonnie First applied for a position with the United States Postal Service. He took the Postal Service exam at a testing center in Columbia. He scored an 84. Within 6 months, he was hired as a city carrier assistant in the Dunhaven Post Office, 63 miles south of Columbia, in a town of 11,000 people sitting on the edge of nothing. Dunhaven gave him what nothing else had: a federal job, health insurance, a pension on the horizon. He moved his family into a 3-bedroom on Magnolia Drive within a year of starting. He drove the same long-life vehicle for 10 years. He knew every dog on every porch from Carrollton Avenue to the cul-de-sac at the end of Cottonwood Lane. His performance evaluations, year over year, described him as dependable, courteous with patrons, and consistently meets expectations. A 2018 review noted he demonstrates strong route knowledge and route ownership. A 2020 review described him as a steady presence on a high-volume residential route. He was promoted to regular carrier in 2017. By 2021, he had 10 years on the books and was widely considered one of the most reliable carriers at the Dunhaven station. His co-workers liked him. He coached his son's Little League team for 2 seasons. He drove a battered 2002 Ford F-150 with a small USPS sticker on the back window. He bought a fishing boat in 2019, a 16-foot aluminum John boat he kept on a trailer in the side yard. He cashed his paychecks at the same credit union in Allendale for 10 years. And then, sometime in the spring of 2021, he made a decision. He never wrote down the moment. He never told a friend. Whatever crossed his mind, on whatever afternoon he was sorting the morning's mail at his case, he decided to keep one of the envelopes. The Dunhaven Post Office sits at the corner of Main and Calhoun, in a single-story brick building with a flagpole, a public lobby of 32 P.O. boxes, and a back-of-house operations floor where letter carriers begin their day at 5:30 in the morning. The flow of mail through the building was the same flow it had been for 40 years. Distribution mail arrived overnight by truck from the Columbia Processing and Distribution Center. Carriers reported by 5:30, clocked in, walked back to their assigned cases, and began the sort. A carrier's case is a piece of standing furniture, roughly 6 feet wide and 6 feet tall, with vertical pigeonholes for every address on the route. Lonnie First's case had 540 pigeonholes, one for each household on Route 6. The morning sort meant taking the previous night's distribution and arranging every envelope, flat and small parcel, into the proper hole, in the proper delivery sequence. The system was designed in an era of personal correspondence. It was designed to handle named recipient mail, bank statements, utility bills, magazines, letters from family. The premise, baked into every layer of postal regulation since the 1800s, was simple. The value of a piece of mail belonged to the named recipient. A check written to John Smith was useless to anyone who was not John Smith. A bank statement addressed to a household at 412 Cottonwood Lane was meaningless to anyone outside that household. That premise made the system trust the carrier in ways the carrier did not need to be trusted. There were no cameras on the case floor. The morning sort was conducted alone. Carriers were responsible for handling mail with integrity, and they were trained to understand that mail theft was a federal crime under Title 18, United States Code, Section 1709. The penalty was up to 5 years in federal prison. The deterrent was the law itself. What the system had not adapted to was the gift card. Gift cards entered American mail volume in the early 2000s and grew steadily. By 2021, they were a multi-billion-dollar segment of the holiday mail stream. Birthday cards, graduation cards, Mother's Day cards, Father's Day cards, Christmas cards from grandparents in Tampa to grandchildren in Dunhaven, a Visa prepaid loaded with $200, a Target card with $75, a Cracker Barrel card with $50. Gift cards inverted the system's founding assumption. They were not named recipient instruments. They were possession instruments. Whoever held the card and its activation code held the value. The envelope might be addressed to Madison at 1117 Cottonwood Lane. The card inside was payable to anyone, and gift card envelopes were identifiable. They were almost always small, square, slightly thicker than a normal greeting card, and often arrived in branded envelopes from Hallmark or American Greetings with a faint plastic outline showing through the paper. A trained eye could spot them in the sort within a second. Lonnie First had 10 years of trained eyes. His first theft, by his own later admission to investigators, was in April of 2021. It was a Mother's Day card from a sender in Greenville to a recipient on Hartwell Avenue. The envelope was lavender. The plastic outline of a card was visible through the paper. He had handled hundreds like it over the years. That morning, during the sort, he held it for 3 seconds longer than the others. Then he slid it into the inside pocket of his uniform jacket and continued the sort. He carried the envelope through his shift. He delivered the rest of the mail to Hartwell Avenue. He drove the LLV back to the Dunhaven station at 4:15, clocked out at 4:22, and drove home with the envelope still in his jacket pocket. In the cab of his pickup, parked in the driveway of the house on Magnolia, he opened it. A handwritten card. A photograph of 2 small children. a Visa prepaid with a sticker noting $100 in stored value. He activated the card at a Shell station in Hampton the next morning and used it to fill his tank and buy a case of beer. Nothing happened. No one called. No one knocked on his door. 2 weeks passed. The sender, somewhere in Greenville, presumably wondered what had happened to the card. The recipient on Hartwell Avenue presumably never knew it had existed. By June, he was taking 2 or 3 cards a week. By the December holidays of 2021, he was taking 8 to 12. His method calcified into a routine. During the morning sort, he identified envelopes likely to contain gift cards by feel, by thickness, by sender markings, by envelope brand. He set them aside, casually, in a low corner of his case. Before pushing the loaded route trays to the loading dock, he transferred the flagged envelopes into a battered black canvas messenger bag he carried in and out of the building each day. The messenger bag rode in the passenger footwell of his LLV. The envelopes never made it to the addressed homes. He opened them at one of 3 locations: in the cab of his pickup in the post office parking lot at the end of his shift, in the garage at the house on Magnolia, in a back booth at a Waffle House in Hampton, where he sometimes stopped on the way home. He kept the cards. He kept the activation codes. He threw the envelopes and the personal cards and the photographs of children into kitchen trash bags that he set out for collection on Wednesday mornings. He converted the cards into cash 2 ways. The easier way was direct redemption. He used Visa and MasterCard prepaids to buy fuel, groceries, hardware, beer, and bait. He used Target and Walmart cards to buy the same things at retail. He used restaurant cards to pay for meals he had been buying out of pocket. He estimated later that he saved his household roughly $1,400 a month by 2022, simply by paying for everything with stolen prepaid cards. The harder, more lucrative way was online resale. Sometime in the fall of 2021, he registered an account on a card resale platform under a slightly altered version of his name and a prepaid email address. He listed cards at 60 to 80 cents on the dollar. The platform paid him through ACH transfer to a checking account he opened at a credit union in Allendale, an account his wife did not know existed. He escalated. He learned the seasonal rhythm. December holidays produced his largest take, sometimes 40 to 60 cards in a single week, with total face value approaching $12,000 in the first 2 weeks of December alone. Mother's Day produced a second peak, graduation season in May, Father's Day, Christmas again. He learned what to skip. Cards from senders whose handwriting suggested an elderly relative were lower risk to steal because elderly senders were less likely to follow up. Cards addressed to homes he knew had college-aged recipients away at school were higher risk because the parents tracked them. He developed an instinct. By 2023, he was taking, on average, 15 to 20 cards per week. His best month, December of 2023, produced $68,000 in face value. No one at the Dunhaven Post Office noticed. No one at USPS noticed. Patron complaints about missing mail on Route 6 existed in the system, but they sat at a level the local postmaster considered ordinary background noise for a residential carrier. Mail goes missing. People assume the sender forgot. People assume the post office lost it. People assume. Margaret Coleman was 73 years old and lived in a small house off Pinckney Road, 4 blocks from the Dunhaven Post Office, in a neighborhood she had lived in for 41 years. She had 3 grandchildren. They lived in 3 different states. Her oldest son's daughter was in Charlotte. Her younger son's twins, a boy and a girl, were in Jacksonville. She had not seen any of them in person since the summer of 2022. Every year, for every birthday and every Christmas, she sent each grandchild a card. Inside every card, she included a $200 Visa prepaid. She bought the cards at the Walgreens on Main Street the week before mailing. She wrote the children's names on the envelopes in cursive she had perfected in 1962. She walked the envelopes to the Dunhaven Post Office and mailed them from the lobby. In December of 2022, all 3 Christmas cards failed to arrive. The grandchildren in Charlotte and Jacksonville did not call to thank her. which was unusual. She called her sons. The sons confirmed nothing had arrived. She drove to the post office in early January and asked the clerk at the counter what could have happened. The clerk told her sometimes holiday mail was delayed. Margaret Coleman accepted that, but she made a note. In December of 2023, the same thing happened. All 3 Christmas cards failed to arrive. $600 in gift cards, 2 consecutive holiday seasons, 6 cards in total, 0 arrivals. Margaret Coleman did not accept that. She had kept the receipts from Walgreens. She had kept the activation slips that came with the prepaid visas. She had even, by 2023, written down the last 4 digits of the card numbers in a small notebook she kept in a kitchen drawer, the way she had once written down check numbers in a register. In January of 2024, she filed a formal complaint with the United States Postal Service Office of Inspector General. The complaint was 3 pages long, handwritten, in the same cursive she had used on the envelopes. It included card numbers, dates of mailing, dates the cards were expected to arrive, and the names and addresses of all 3 grandchildren. She included photocopies of the Walgreens receipts. The complaint reached the USPS OIG field office in Columbia on January 17, 2024. A junior agent named Patricia Whitlock pulled it from the queue on a Friday afternoon. She read it 3 times. She noticed something most complaints lacked. Margaret Coleman had attached the activation slips. The activation slips meant the cards could be traced. Patricia Whitlock opened a case file the following Monday. Quick break. Stories like this one do not get the attention they deserve. If you appreciate accountability coverage that names the institution and walks through the actual evidence, subscribe and hit the notification bell. The investigation is about to get into controlled mail testing, which is the part most people never get to see. Subscribe and stick around. USPS OIG opens roughly 700 carrier misconduct investigations a year. Most close without charges. Most are insufficient. Margaret Coleman's complaint was different in one specific way. 6 cards, 6 activation codes, a traceable evidentiary trail if any of those codes had ever been used. Patricia Whitlock pulled the redemption records for Margaret Coleman's 6 cards from Visa's prepaid processing partner within 10 days. All 6 cards had been activated. 2 had been redeemed at a Walmart in Allendale, South Carolina, in transactions dated within 72 hours of their expected delivery dates. 2 had been redeemed online through a card resale platform under an account registered to an email address that did not match Margaret Coleman or any of her grandchildren. 2 had been used to pay for fuel at a Shell station in Hampton. The redemption pattern told her 2 things. The cards had been intercepted in the mail stream before reaching their addressed recipients. And the person who intercepted them was operating within a 40-mile radius of Dunhaven. She pulled the carrier roster for Route 6. The carrier was Lonnie First, 10-year employee, no disciplinary record, no prior complaints in his personnel file. She did not approach him. In February of 2024, USPS OIG initiated a controlled mail test on Route 6. The test involved preparing 15 pieces of mail over a 6-week window, each containing a gift card with a monitored activation code. The cards were prepared in cooperation with a prepaid card issuer's fraud unit, which flagged the cards in their system. Any activation, any redemption, any online sale would generate a real-time alert. The test mail was constructed to mimic the envelope characteristics of organic gift card mail. Lavender envelopes from purported aunts in Atlanta. White Hallmark envelopes from purported grandparents in Florida. Square red envelopes with handwritten addresses. Each piece was injected into the Dunhaven processing flow through Columbia, addressed to real Route 6 households whose residents had agreed to participate in the test. Of the 15 test pieces, 11 did not arrive at their addressed recipients. Of those 11, 9 were activated within 4 days. 7 were redeemed at retail locations within 60 miles of Dunhaven, including the Allendale Walmart, the Hampton Shell, a Lowe's in Walterboro, and a Cracker Barrel in Yemassee. 2 were listed for resale on the same card resale platform under the same account that had been used to sell Margaret Coleman's grandchildren's cards. The platform account was registered to an email address Patricia Whitlock subpoenaed. The email account had been opened in 2021 from an IP address assigned to a residential cable modem on Magnolia Drive in Dunhaven. The cable account was registered to Brandy First. That was the chain. USPS OIG opened a parallel investigation in May of 2024 with the United States Postal Inspection Service and the FBI's Columbia Field Office. Investigators obtained pen register data on Lonnie First's personal cell phone. They placed a covert GPS unit on his pickup. They followed him for 67 days. During those 67 days, they observed him stop at the Hampton Waffle House 22 times. They observed him stop at the Allendale Credit Union 19 times. They observed him purchase items at retail using prepaid cards on 41 separate occasions. They watched him open envelopes in the parking lot of his post office on at least 9 occasions. In August of 2024, a federal magistrate signed search warrants for his residence, his pickup, and his postal locker. The arrest came at 2:14 on the afternoon of August 28, 2024. Lonnie First was 42 stops into his afternoon route. He had parked the LLV at the curb in front of 1117 Cottonwood Lane, the back doors open, a tray of flats balanced on the rear bumper. 2 unmarked vehicles approached from opposite ends of the block. A USPS OIG special agent named Daniel Reyes stepped out of the first. 2 FBI agents stepped out of the second. A Dunhaven police cruiser pulled in behind them, blocking the LLV from the curb. Lonnie First was holding an envelope in his left hand. It was lavender. It was square. The plastic outline of a card was visible through the paper. Reyes identified himself. Mr. First, United States Postal Service, Office of Inspector General. I need you to step away from the vehicle and place that envelope on the bumper. What's this about? Sir, place the envelope on the bumper. Step back from the vehicle. I'm in the middle of a route. Mr. First, the envelope. On the bumper. Now. He placed the envelope on the bumper. His hand was steady. His eyes were on the cruiser. We have a search warrant for the vehicle. We have a search warrant for your residence. You are under arrest. Turn around and place your hands on the side panel. What's the charge? Theft of mail by a postal employee, possession of stolen mail, access device fraud, wire fraud. He did not say anything else. He turned. He placed his hands flat on the white side panel of the long life vehicle. He looked briefly down the block, at the houses he had delivered to for 10 years, at the porch of 1117 Cottonwood, at the mailbox he had not yet reached. He said one word. Okay. He did not ask for a lawyer until they reached the federal courthouse in Columbia 3 hours later. The agents recovered 312 undelivered envelopes from the LLV. 47 contained gift cards. The federal indictment came down on October 11, 2024, from a grand jury in the District of South Carolina. Lonnie Edward First was charged with 1 count of theft of mail by a postal employee under Title 18, United States Code, Section 1709, 1 count of possession of stolen mail under Section 1708, 3 counts of access device fraud under Section 1029, 2 counts of wire fraud under Section 1343. The indictment ran 61 pages. His defense attorney, a Columbia-based federal practitioner named Howard Lemke, filed an initial motion to suppress the controlled mail test results, arguing the test constituted a form of entrapment because investigators had introduced mail into the carrier's workflow specifically to be stolen. The motion was denied on December 14, 2024, by United States District Judge Caroline Tate, who wrote that controlled mail testing has been a recognized investigative tool of the Postal Inspection Service for nearly a century, and that the defendant's choice to steal the test mail was no different in nature from his prior choices to steal organic mail. After the suppression ruling, Lemke advised his client to plead. Lonnie First pleaded guilty on February 6, 2025, to 1 count of theft of mail by a postal employee, 1 count of access device fraud, and 1 count of wire fraud. The remaining counts were dismissed under the plea agreement. He admitted, on the record, in open court, to taking gift card mail from Route 6 between April of 2021 and August of 2024. He admitted to converting approximately $730,000 in face value into approximately $510,000 in proceeds. Sentencing was held on May 22, 2025. Margaret Coleman drove the 4 blocks from her house on Pinckney to the federal courthouse in Columbia. She wore a navy blue dress she had bought in 1998 for her husband's funeral. She read a victim impact statement from a single sheet of yellow legal paper, in cursive she had perfected in 1962. She said, "$600 is not a lot of money to some people. It was 3 Christmases to me. I will not get those Christmases back. My grandchildren will not get those cards back. The thing I cannot stop thinking about is the cards I do not know about, the birthdays, the Mother's Days, the cards he took from other grandmothers who never wrote it down." 41 additional victim impact statements were entered into the record in writing. Judge Tate spoke for nearly 7 minutes before pronouncing sentence. She said, "The position you occupied was one of the oldest positions of trust in this country. Letter carrier. The integrity of the mail is not a slogan. It is the operational premise of an institution that predates the country itself. You betrayed that for 3 years and $730,000. You betrayed it with calculation. You targeted the senders least likely to follow up. You took from grandmothers. You took from children. You took with a deliberate understanding of what you were doing every single morning at your case." She sentenced him to 48 months in federal prison. She ordered restitution in the amount of $730,000 to be administered through a federal trust to identified senders and recipients on Route 6. She imposed a permanent bar on future federal employment. He was remanded immediately. He was processed at FCI Williamsburg, a low-security federal correctional institution in Salters, South Carolina, 83 miles east of Dunhaven. His projected release date is November of 2028. Brandy first filed for divorce in July of 2025. The house on Magnolia was sold in September. The long-life vehicle that had been his for 10 years was reassigned to a new carrier within a week of his arrest. The new carrier, a 31-year-old named Anthony Briggs, was given the same 540 pigeonholes. The patrons of Route 6 began receiving their mail on time again. Margaret Coleman, as of this recording, still mails 3 Christmas cards to her grandchildren every December. She mails them now from a different post office. She still buys the cards at the same Walgreens on Main Street. She still writes the children's names in the same cursive she perfected in 1962. She no longer writes down the card numbers in her notebook. She does not need to. This case was quiet in a way that makes it worse. But the case on the right-hand side is even more outrageous. Click it now.